Okay, next in our mini-series of presentations is a look at the architectural market in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. In my previous presentation, I explained, or at least outlined, the strong effects COVID-19 was having on the global economy, the UK economy, and on construction output. And I want to look at the architectural market, and I'll start by outlining what we knew about the architectural market prior to COVID-19 and what is happening. So I think business benchmarking, every year we carry out a survey at the RIBA of around 3,500 RIBA chartered practices, and that allows architects to benchmark their performance across a range of indicators. It also provides the RIBA with a very clear picture of what architects are doing and what the financial status is of the UK architectural market. I think last year we were at the end of a period of fairly rapid growth. There were 44,000 staff directly employed by RIBA chartered practices that worked on over 173,000 projects, and the revenue from all chartered practices in 2019 was over £3.5 billion. And we'll see that revenue had been growing consecutively year on year since 2012. So between 2014 and 2020, the revenue associated with RIBA chartered practices had almost doubled in that relatively short period of time. Number of staff similarly had increased 8% higher in 2019 than in 2018. Similarly, revenue had grown 13% in revenue, but it's noticeable that pretty much all of the increase in revenue had been matched by a higher expenditure. So the profitability of UK architects remained fairly consistent throughout the period. It's worth noting how concentrated revenue is by practice size. There's relatively few large practices account for almost half of UK architectural revenue, but you can see those smaller practices, of which there are many, make up a relatively small part of the total architectural revenue. I think when thinking about working with architects, I know for manufacturers the specification process is extremely important around stage 4 of the project. But it's worth highlighting, as I hope this table does, that most architects, for most of their work, around half of their work comes from full service. So ideas around product selection will be brought very early in the stages, in the early concept design stages, and will travel through the more detailed design and finally into construction. So it's worth thinking about a broad range of mechanisms that get in touch with architects at each point of the RIBA plan of work. It's notable that it's a very small percentage who work only in stages 4 to 6, the detailed design stage onward. I'd like now to look at RIBA Future Trends. We carry out a monthly survey to monitor architects' workloads, and we initiated this in 2009 at the last really difficult time for the architectural and construction markets. So it does give us a reasonable historical outlook. This is the Future Trends graph since we initiated it. So we can see in 2009 the financial crisis meant that people were giving negative scores of -30. Then it picked up slowly through to around 2015, where it hit its high point of +44. Then we'll see in 2016 it had, for the first time in years, its first dip into negative territory as a referendum result came through. It then bounced around a little, but really was starting to flatten and dip into negative territory as uncertainty about Brexit increased. Then with the election result, we saw quite a sudden jump as it looked like we'd have reached certainty around Brexit. But then as COVID-19 took hold, we saw the strongest decline we've ever seen in the RIBA Future Trends score, falling down to -82. What that figure means is -82, we simply take the number, the percentage of those who think workloads is going to increase, and we deduct the percentage of those who think workload is going to decrease. So we can see that on balance, 82% felt workload was going to decrease with the COVID-19 crisis. But what's been remarkable is a very rapid recovery as lockdown eases and work starts to come back for the architectural market. So this is what's happened, just drilling in a little bit into this year. So in July it returned to the positive territory, a significant turnaround in architects' confidence, and after a tumultuous 5 months where we've seen the fastest and deepest collapse in architects' confidence, but that was followed by the strongest run. Looking at this by sector, what's really noticeable, and I spoke earlier about the private sector, housing, is that there was very much a collapse in confidence generally, but housing was particularly badly hit. But housing since then, the residential area, has seen the fastest growth in confidence. There's a number of things going on there. Large private housing schemes are coming back on stream, but I think we're also seeing a very significant uptick in domestic work, where people are looking at their current housing arrangement and wanting to change it so that they can better move, better work in the new environment. So their house is not only a place for family and for leisure, but is increasingly becoming a place for work too, and people are adapting their homes in light of that. Staffing index, we'll just monitor whether architectural practices think they'll employ more or fewer staff, and that's negative, but it's noticeable that architects do try to keep the staff they have through crises. And then I thought I'd share with you the actual level of architect workload and the kind of scenarios we were looking at the RIBA at the start of the crisis. So the orange line is the actual workloads compared to a year ago. So at the moment we're just over 10% down of where we were a year ago. So far, the actual workload has been better than the scenario we expected. We expected workloads to return to about where they were pre-crisis towards the end of this year and into next year. It's looking more likely that there'll be a more sustained period of depression in the market and a slightly longer time for recovery. But nevertheless, I think this shows the resilience of architects, and that architects, because of their flexibility and creativity, are ready to respond to whatever kind of built environment we need to accommodate our changes in living and working habits. And I'll